base of strength in the domestic market. And as a result, over the last 4 years, we've been able to grow from a market share of a little over 10.5%, 10.7% to be precise, 4 years ago, to actually catching up with Hyundai and finally overtaking and eking out a lead over a company like Hyundai to where a market share of about 17%. Over this period of time, both Maruti Suzuki and Hyundai, who are some of the most aggressive Asian players, have actually lost ground to a company like Tata Motors. I think this was important because we needed to make sure that in our domestic market we achieved a degree of strength and stability before we would start to look at further growth. When it came to market adjacencies, while we've selected and executed our strategy in several markets, I can use the example of South Africa as a valid example of moving into an adjacent market. As a group, we found South Africa as a country and an economy possessed many characteristics similar to India, a combination of affluence and a combination of need for low-cost products, a wide variety of terrain and environments, roads that were both good and bad, and a growing population moving into the car buying segment, but wanting very high-value products. And in the execution of the South African strategy, as a group, we decided to not restrict it to 1 or 2 product segments alone, but we went in across the board with commercial vehicles, passenger cars, telecom, steel, a whole range of products, so that we were able to establish Tata as a brand, as a recognizable, viable brand that would achieve the advantages of market adjacency, not just in one sector, but across a range of sectors. This provided a tremendous amount of momentum to what we wanted to do, and as a result, we had about the best launch ever for a small car in a fairly sophisticated market like South Africa, where almost every other global automaker is present. Beyond this, we too then went into select developed country markets. Now, part of the advantage of early entry into some of the developed country markets was also to keep us on our toes. Presence in these developed country markets required a level of technology absorption, a level of technological progress that we would not have been forced to if we were to run with the pace of being in the domestic market alone. And as a result, when we made the decision to go into markets in Europe with products like the Indica and Indigo, it forced us to adopt technologies like anti-lock brakes, airbag systems for the driver, airbag systems for the passenger, have Euro 3 emission compliant vehicles well before it was necessary for India. And even today, we will have by the end of this year Euro 4 compliant vehicles, both from the Indica, Indigo, and the Safari lines, even though Euro 4 compliance will not be necessary in India until 2010. So this gives us the pace of growth that we found necessary to keep our product technologies evolving as fast as they should, and indeed making more opportunities possible for us in other markets. As a result, over these last few years, we've been marching this course towards growing to be a credible international player. We've stabilized the company with substantial growth in turnover and operating profits, and we've continued to maintain improvements in our cost of or return on capital employed, even as we've started to build a growing overseas footprint. As a result, today when one looks at the passenger car world, while the top 10 players are well known, the same studies already now start to show Tata Motors on the radar screen as one of the fastest growing global auto companies. I think we've got a long way to go before we can pat ourselves on the back and claim to have emerged as a credible Indian multinational. But I think as a company, we're confident that the kinds of steps we've taken and the course that we are setting will take us indeed to this state. And I think this example merely indicates that at this time, a number of Indian companies are really walking the same course. And I think it is going to be something that all of us in India will be proud of, to say that over a period of time, there will be more than just the handful within the global 500, that there will be a large sprinkling of Indian organizations that can claim to have traversed from being domestic companies to truly becoming Indian multinationals and leveraging manufacturing capability. Thank you.
This time I will request all the speakers to return to the dais, and we want to open up the session for any questions from the audience. Anybody? Yes, I think Harita.
I am Professor Senguttuvan from Madras. I would like to raise this question, Professor Anant. How far this education, because of globalization, it will be affected? I mean, IIT USA, Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago, and another university, Carnegie Mellon University, they are offering their courses in Madras itself. So that may, Indian institutes, they have to be more competitive. And in most parts of India, education also has become industry.
It's a hard question to answer. Actually, as far as undergraduate education is concerned, I think I can say very safely that IITs have no competition. Really, at the current cost of education, there is no comparable education anywhere in the world. But what many of these universities are planning are to bring graduate schools to India. Georgia Tech, for example, is also planning to come. In fact, ironically, they want to consult us about how to do that. They are asking us how do we come to India and establish a good graduate school. I think the problem is one of investment, and I think right now India is capable of investing, and we have to invest in good graduate schools. And this is a competition that we can face, but like in all cases, I think in India we tend to create the crisis first and then solve the problem. So I think we're waiting for the crisis to become a little more of a crisis, really.
This is a question to Mr. Anant. I am Vikas Khemani. I am a student from ISP. Why are we concentrating so much on the manufacturing sector? I mean, we see that the IT sector is growing so fast, and the investments, I mean, the returns are so high. So why not just take the IT itself, take charge and go on?
Do you want to answer this?
Go ahead.
Good. No, I think the IT sector is growing, but we all know that the actual, like Sumantran pointed out in the manufacturing sector, the fraction of Indian contribution in the IT sector is also very small of the total global market. First. Secondly, at the high end of the IT sector, we have very little operations. We are still leveraging our, essentially, the lower cost of the thing. Lot of it is what would be still called body shopping. We are still leveraging that. And I don't think anybody is preventing the IT sector from growing. We are saying the manufacturing sector also has to grow substantially. Would you like to add?
I think the only other point to add would be, for an economy as large as India, we can't put all our bets on one sector. IT has served India very well. I think it's been a very credible ambassador of India's skills and capabilities. But for a moment, do you think that China is going to be happy by saying we will let go of IT and focus on manufacturing? China, you can bet, at this point, is very, very rapidly trying to scale up its IT sector, both in hardware and in software. And so when you talk about the planning for a whole economy, particularly an economy as large as India, I think it would be very unwise to say we will bet our future on one sector. We need broad-based growth. We need employment generation. We need contributions to economic development coming from so many areas. And so even today, even a country as far up the development scale as the US will not give up its agricultural sector. Even though one might make the argument that why does the agricultural sector matter to the US? I think large economies need broad-based foundations. And I think it's important that India continue to focus on its IT sector, but at the same time allow much more broader-based economic development to happen across a number of the other sectors, biotech, agriculture, manufacturing, altogether.
Sir, I've got two questions. First question to Mr. Sumantran, please. Sir, we have been hearing that Ratan Tata has a mission of coming out with a car for rupee 1 lakh. Now, I think you are working on it to fulfill his mission. Now, if he comes out with a car of 1 lakh, I think we have the whole global market as our customers. And how would you think that, and if we have it, I think globally we would be very competitive in manufacturing sectors for auto industry. So I'd like your comments on that.
I've so far deliberately said very little about the 1 lakh car. Every engineer is trained to talk very little about future R&D projects. But I can only say this, what started off 2 years ago as a bold dream and a vision, it was in a sense like the statement that President Kennedy made of saying, by the end of the decade, we'll put a man on the moon. We didn't know how we were going to do it, we didn't know if we could do it, but we said, that's got to be a goal for us. I think in the 2 years that have elapsed, I can say with a great deal of confidence that what we thought was a bold dream looks very, very achievable today. And that's because of the kind of effort that has gone on in every element of such an endeavor. The manufacturing system, the product design, the technologies you will involve. And by the way, this is not a low-tech, low-cost product. This is actually a combination of adopting very high technology where it's appropriate and very low investment where it's necessary to achieve the right business model to achieve creation of something like a 1 lakh car. Most overseas analysts and colleagues that I talked to were incredulous when we said the price of this car on the road would have to be about $2,200 US. But today I can say that it is not far out of reach. Again, the building blocks have been access to low-cost resources, whether it is engineering resources, trained, skilled people, and a willingness to look at a very innovative manufacturing and business model which is very much focused on minimizing investment and minimizing cost. And I think Indians have been trained to do this. I feel in a recent discussion with Dr. Chidambaram, who is the principal scientific officer to the government of India, we discussed the concept that while every country chooses some core competence, I think one thing we in India can truly claim to have is a skill of innovating around low cost. Not out of any other grand plan other than out of pure necessity, because our economy does not afford the luxury of planning with grand scale. So yes, I think if we can succeed, and we have to demonstrate that we will, but I'm confident of where the project is, that it will lead to a positive outcome. And not just this, but in a number of other similar areas, I think India can leverage what we have inherently and innately learned to do, innovating around constraints and innovating around low cost.
So, second question to Professor Anand. I have just read some of the sectors where you said India would be competitive, and there were about 11 to 12 sectors. But I'm just looking at, from the government perspective also, if you look at India being a traditionally agri-economy, but then now we have totally shifted to services. And I believe services on the long run may have a lot of competition and maybe a very dependent sector. It will be a dependent sector and not independent. And India being a traditional agri-economy, how you would do probably put India globally globally competitive on agri sector, because that's been our traditional industry and a very independent industry. And other than agri sectors, what are the other sectors out of this 12 which you will choose as the top 3 in your priority for India's manufacturing?
I don't think I can answer the last question about which are the top ones. There's a lot of discussion going on. But as far as the other sectors are concerned, I think the agricultural sector will continue to have less employment in spite of the fact that we are a very large country. Our efficiency of production is very low in the agricultural sector. As it increases, after all, Europe some 70, 80 years ago had 60% of people in the agricultural sector, or 100 years ago. Now it has 2%. So I think the employment in the agriculture sector will come down with time. The service sector will go up. It will probably stabilize at about 70%. But the remaining will have to be in the manufacturing sector.
But do you think India would be dependent or independent in services sector, say 10 years from now?
I don't know. My perception is that we are globally interdependent. I think some parts of the service sector will be completely in India and some others in other countries and so on. I don't think these geographical divisions are going to... Let me step back and say, I can't resist this. I'm basically a thermodynamist. And the old economy is completely based on thermodynamics. It's based on, in a sense, if I generalize it, it's based on content minus loss due to disorder. In the classical economy,